Hey, it's Drybear. And today I want to talk to you about some things that I learned the hard way in Diablo 4, either through the server slam, the beta tests, and through the live launch, blasting and leveling as hard as I can. These are 11 things that I think will greatly improve your experience, especially if you're just starting with the real launch of the game, and hopefully can save you a lot of heartache and wasted time, as well as allow you to plan better and have a smoother experience in the game. So let's get started. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Now, normally this is the part where I would give you a minor inconvenience that would befall you if you don't come hang out with me on my live stream, but there's even more reason to come hang out. There are major things that you can pick up on my live stream. First of these, tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, you will be able to pick up this mount if you gift 2 subs to the channel. There's also a big list online of other creators you can do this to. So if there's other people that you want to do this to, give them 2 subs to help support them. It's the support a creator program. So all you have to do is, for any reason, gift 2 subs to the channel. You cannot do it anonymously. It has to be through your Twitch account, and it has to be to one of the viable channels. So you can find that linked online for the list, but I am one of them. So if you give 2 subs to my channel while this event is active, you will get this mount and it will fit your armor, and you'll have this unique, and it'll be on your account forever. On top of that, there are multiple weeks of free items you get just by having the stream open on another tab while you're gaming. You can just listen in or have it there. As long as the stream is open, if you watch the required amount of time, you'll get items. This is going to rotate every week for the next 4 weeks or so, and you'll get items for every single class in the game. And this week for launch, it is Rogue and Necromancer. So the items listed on screen you can get for free just by watching my stream. The first 2 is the dagger and sword you see down at the bottom. And as long as you have the stream up for 3 hours and your Twitch account is linked, you'll be able to get these items. I'll be live today, so you can just get these. And then the 2 items at the top are back items for Necromancer and Rogue that you can get by watching an additional 3 hours and link your Twitch account to get that in game. So get the mount, get the items, or just come hang out if you're looking for a cool place to hang out. I'd be happy to answer any questions or theorycraft with you about the game, or just kind of commiserate as you grind and push towards the end. All right, let's jump into 11 things I wish I knew sooner so it could improve my Diablo 4 experience. Some of these are really awesome and they aren't well explained, so it's awesome to be able to have these in your knowledge bank. The first one is that the Helltide activities that overtake the map are absolutely required. I put off doing Helltide, and I really wish that I didn't, because you get a lot of value and they're necessary for progressing your character. So if you look on the map, occasionally there will be Helltides that spawn. It'll affect a random zone in an area. You will see a red sword down icon. It looks like this here in the middle of the screen. So this is what you're looking for, is this little sword icon in the middle of the screen. And you'll notice that near this icon, the map itself is going to be red. So everything around this is actually going to be reddish, and everywhere that that red map exists is part of the Helltide. So the areas that aren't lit up like that are not Helltide. The reason that you want to do Helltide is not only do you get loot and experience and some kind of nice bonuses, there's chests to get and there's resources, but the primary reason, the most valuable aspect from Helltide, is the unique resources that you get from the event that you need for gearing your character. The first one is Fiend Rose. These drop from herbs and gathering materials around the Helltide, as well as from the chests and sometimes from the mobs. You can see that it's a rare herb that is found only when Sanctuary gives way to Hell's influence. You can only get this, as far as I know, from Helltide. The other one is going to be Forgotten Souls. These are found during Helltide as well, and they're used to improve sacred and ancestral items. So not only are you using it for re-rolling your character, re-rolling your gear, getting new stats on them, better stats on them, enchanting, also upgrading to the last level will require this. And so I wish that I did this sooner, just went to the Helltide and completed them. I have a video that I posted before this one going over the details of Helltide, how to maximize it and optimize it, where to get all the resources, and how to get the best value out of every Helltide that you can. So refer to that. I'll put it down in the description if you want to go watch the Helltide video. The next thing that I wish I knew sooner is that you get your mount about at the beginning of Act 4. So you will be able to get your mount by completing the campaign. I actually ended up doing a ton of renown, pushing renown in every zone to try and get as high as I could because I was having fun. But at the end of the day, it does feel like the mount was worth getting. So all you have to do to get the mount is to go through the campaign until you reach through the desert towards the end of Act 3. And it'll start Act 4 by taking you from the desert back to Kyovashad. And once you do that and you talk to Bonin, you'll be able to get your mount. And then you'll have it unlocked for all characters, even if they're level 1. This allows you to move around. You can mount in combat. You can even jump over some gaps that require the spacebar to get over. So it's super nice to have this and makes the game a little bit smoother. Number 3, the thing I wish I knew sooner was the fact that doing nightmare dungeons gives you the dungeon bonus reward. I didn't actually know this because I didn't think about it, but as I've been doing super late game pushing, I've noticed that this does actually work. So if you don't know, nightmare dungeons are the end game activity for Diablo 4. It's akin to maps or greater rifts or mythic plus in various forms. But what you do is you get these sigils once you are in world tier 3 and world tier 4 that will modify an existing dungeon to be harder and give it affixes. So it'll say on it, you see this is Whispering Pines, this is Dark Ravine, Blind Burrows. These are all dungeons that exist in the world. And what you do is you activate the sigil, and then it'll mark with that dungeon specifically to be Nightmare. You will go to that dungeon manually and enter, and it'll be Nightmare. But here's the trick. The thing that I didn't know sooner was that if you haven't completed the one-time reward on that dungeon, the one that gives you renown progress and unlocks the Codex Legendary for that dungeon, doing it on Nightmare will give it to you. So while leveling, yes, it's super useful to do dungeons. You get renown progress. They give better drops than just overworld and going around and doing campaign. And it's useful for just leveling and getting better experience in general. But eventually you will be doing nightmare dungeons, and those nightmare dungeons over time will random any dungeon on the map. And as you continually religiously doing nightmare dungeons, you will be completing these one-time rewards to fill out your codex and fill out your renown that you're doing anyways. For number 4, since we're on the topic of dungeons and codex, one thing that I wish I knew sooner was Codex of Power. For getting these legendaries unlocked, if there's a specific one that you want, you can actually have the map mark it for you. So go to one of the legendaries you don't have that you wish you had, and all you have to do on PC is left click on this. When you do that, you can see that it went from remove pin to pin on map. Click this, and now when I go to my map, it will give me a waypoint all the way to the dungeon that gives me that legendary power. So I can very easily say, oh, it's right here. If I have a waypoint nearby, I grab it, I jump in the dungeon, I get the codex easily. So if you're wondering, if you're kind of browsing your codex, wondering what to get, you can very easily just left click on it, go to the dungeon, get it done, or maybe you're lucky and by doing nightmare dungeons, you've unlocked it already. The next thing I wish I knew sooner was that there is an awesome system for sorting gear that you get. You're going to get tons of gear in this game, so it's very cool to be able to sort through it quickly. And that is when you're hovering over an item that you have in your inventory, you have an option to mark it as junk. What this does is it puts it in a special I don't care about this anymore category, which is really cool. So on PC, you press spacebar when you're looking at the item, and you can see that now that item has a big line through it that X's it out, and you can do it again to unmark it as junk. What this will do is it'll put all items that are marked this way into a special bin called junk, and when you apply any action to one of those items, it'll apply that action to all of those items. Why is this useful? So when I finish a nightmare dungeon or a big event and I have a bunch of items, I'll go through and say, okay, I want that. I don't want that. I'll kind of mark the ones that I do want, don't need that, go through. And now I have my inventory sorted. So these are the ones that I'm keeping. Those are the ones that I'm not. So if I apply any action to these items, namely if I go and salvage, right? So if I go to this and I salvage anything that's marked as junk, it will salvage everything marked as junk. If I go to a vendor and I sell an item that's marked as junk, then it will sell every item marked as junk. So what I usually will do, let's unmark these uniques so I don't accidentally get rid of these. What I usually do is I will put down, when I get an inventory, I'll take the legendaries that I'm going to extract and I'll put them down in the bottom right and put them next to each other so I know where they are. The legendaries that I know I'm going to salvage for the salvage materials, I put them in the bottom left. And for all the yellows where I'm looking for base stats that I can use to imprint and make better gear out of, if I want to keep them, I just keep them. If I don't, I'll mark them as junk, and then I'll go and sell them for the gold amount. You can see that I have 2 million gold right now, but I had like 12 million about an hour ago because I was re-rolling one of my rings. As you enchant more and more on the same item, it starts to cost millions of gold. So you will be selling yellows for the gold later on, but you still need the salvage materials from legendaries and above to get that there. So marking as junk is huge. It makes everything so much easier. I recommend getting into the habit of using it. The next thing I wish I knew sooner was that Blizzard went back on their plans for this. You may have heard from other creators or through the grapevine that there are restrictions to how you apply your aspects to your gear when you imprint. And you can even see this was the original plan, because when you look at extracted aspects from items, if it came from normal, which is tier 1 or tier 2, it'll be white and just be a regular aspect. If it came from tier 2 or tier 3, which would be sacred, then you will have a yellow aspect. And then if it came from ancestral, which is tier 4, it'll be blue. Previously, leading up to launch, Blizzard intended, and it worked this way in testing versions of the game, where you had to have equal tier or higher to imprint a legendary on the item. What this meant was that when you got all of your legendaries for normal and you upgraded to tier 3 and unlocked sacred, you would be unable to apply a normal aspect onto your gear, which means that when you got into the sacred tier, you'd have to re-earn all of your legendary powers in that tier, and then again once you get to ancestral. However, without any word and without explanation, when we went live, this is no longer the case. I can take a normal aspect and I can apply it to ancestral gear, and there's nothing stopping me from doing so. So until we get word from them or they decide that they're going to change it or take it away, this is how it works. You can actually get legendaries from tier 1 and tier 2 and apply them to your ancestral gear in tier 3 or tier 4 in order to get that value without having to do anything. So what this means is not only can you farm lower level gear for the legendaries to get perfect rolls and drops on things, you can also, when you upgrade a tier, so say you have full legendaries when you're in normal and you want to go into sacred. When you swap over, fill all of your gear slots with good yellow-based sacred gear, extract the legendaries from all of your legendaries from the previous tier, and then apply them to the new sacred-based gear. By the way, if you didn't know, on these, you can see that there's a golden glow on the top of the item for sacred and a bluish glow at the top of the item for ancestral. So once you see that, you can swap it up and upgrade, and it gives you value there. But as of right now, you can actually apply legendary powers to any item of any tier as long as you have the aspect. The next thing that I wish I knew sooner is all of the options that are available to you. I'm going to bunch this in as one single tip in case some of these are useful to you and some of these are not to your preference. But if you go into the options setting, there's some really awesome things in here that I wish I knew about sooner. The first one is the advanced tooltips in the game. I think if you're serious about progressing your character and getting all the way to the top, I would recommend turning this on. If you like the more casual aspect and just kind of playing and looking for minor, upgrades that work for you, but you're not trying to min-max, then you can go ahead and drop this. But I would recommend turning on Advanced Tooltip Compare and Advanced Tooltip Information. This will mean that when you're comparing items, it tells you what you will lose and what you will gain when you swap that item. So let's go look at an item really quick in our stash that we can look at here. So I can do this and see that when I equip this item, these are the stats that I will lose, the stats that I will gain, and it compares them. The advanced tooltip information is what you see in gray next to the stat. It tells you the range of value that you would get from the drops. You can tell if it's a max roll or not. So when you see an item that has a max roll power, like a legendary or a stat, you can see that it's max roll, which helps you a lot in determining its worth. But it also will tell you whether something is multiplicative or additive, which is a big, big boon for the value of the item. So it'll have an X if it's multiplicative or plus if it's additive, which is awesome for your overall awareness. And other options that are listed under the gameplay category at the top here. The next thing under gameplay that I would consider is highlights. This is personal preference. Some people like this, some people don't, but you can turn on display player highlights and you can mess with the colors of them as well. So this is what it looks like without the player highlight on. If you ever feel like you lose your character in crazy combat and you want, better visibility, you can actually set it up so that your character has an outline on them at all times. You can see them, even if you go behind stuff, you can see them and it gives you that base outline. The base game itself will give you an outline if you ever get completely obscured. So even if you don't have these outlines on, and by the way, you can change the color of them if you don't like the color of them. But if you turn this off, the game itself will, if you ever get completely obscured, which I don't know if I can do in town. Like if you're behind a giant boss and you get perfectly obscured and your character can't be seen at all, it will do a full silhouette on your character so you can see it, but most of the time it won't be there. So that's an option for you for visibility if you do like it. And while we're on the topic, I will give a special mention to cursor scale. This is an option for people that maybe you lose your cursor. You can actually make your cursor massive. If you have trouble keeping track of it, or visibility wise, you just can't find it. If you like it small, you can make it super small. I personally like medium, so it's kind of in between, but this option is here. So again, if you're having trouble placing your abilities, the directionals, things that are very specific, things like Bone Prison, where it has to be in a specific spot. If you're having trouble finding your cursor, you can make it bigger. The next option is under sound. If you go to sound category and go all the way down to the bottom, there is an option to play the error speech when you're playing the game. What does this mean? It means that when you try to use an ability that's on cooldown, if you try to get on your mount when it's not available and you're spamming those buttons, occasionally on a cooldown, your character will say, I can't do that yet. I can't do that. I don't have the resource. I don't have the money. I don't have the friends. I don't have the connections. I need to have a faster car. Anything. It tells you that you have these errors that are going on, and you can have different responses for that. You can make it so that everything is spoken. You can turn it off like I have, which means that no matter how many times you spam the ability, when it's not ready to be used, your character won't say anything. You won't get any sounds there. You can also do simple, which is it'll just play a noise. It won't play a dialogue. And for me, over long play sessions, I don't like the fact that my character becomes so negative and starts telling me I can and can't do things. I like having this off. You may like the sound. Some people like it because it tells you that the thing you're trying to do is almost ready, but not ready yet. But I think this is a great option for a lot of people. You want to have this play audio error on this. I also realized I was covering it. So you can have play audio error here on, off, or simple down at the bottom of sound. The next option is under gameplay, and this one is a must for me. I have to have it this way. It drives me nuts if I don't, and maybe you're like me, so I want to include this as well. By default, when items drop on the ground, there is a duration in which they will show for you. If you're outside the duration, they will hide. This is the default setting for the game, and it drives me crazy. So what you can do is you can have this different setting for item level display. You press the Alt key, and you can rebind this, but you press the Alt key, and items that you drop will show up on the ground in front of you. So when you have them on the ground, you press Alt to show them versus press Alt to not show them. What happens is an item will drop, so you'll drop something, it'll appear on the ground, and then after 10 seconds with the default setting, it'll disappear. The item is still there. I can still click on it, but it's gone because it's not recent. And they do this by default to make sure it reduces clutter so things don't get crazy on your screen. However, I lose track of things, especially in a tough dungeon where I'm focusing on staying alive. 10 seconds pass, something is on the ground, and sometimes I forget it's there. So the setting that I like running with is the toggle on, toggle off. It is a global setting. What this will do is that when you have push to toggle on off, it means that doesn't matter how long this has been sitting on the ground. If I have pressed Alt and I say, I want you to show me item tooltips or item icons here, show it forever. I don't care. I don't care how long it's been. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. Show me the item, keep it there on my screen until I decide to do something with it or I walk away. And I love this setting because it makes it a lot easier for me to see what's going on and determine whether I want something. The only thing is, like, when you return to an area you were farming earlier and the items are still there, you might be like, well, I was here a minute ago. But I think it's way better than simply just having this disappear when you're on screen. So I recommend changing that option. The next tip that I wish I knew sooner is that capstone dungeons can be done early. Capstone dungeons are basically your graduation test for a tier. You have to do them to progress to the next tier, and they have a minimum difficulty that proves that you are capable of moving on to the next tier, and you need to do them to move on. There's going to be a capstone dungeon at level 50 that'll unlock world tier 3 for you for Nightmare. And there's a capstone dungeon at level 70 that will unlock tier 4. And there's more after that as well. However, when you go into your quest journal and you see the capstone dungeon, and when you hover on the capstone dungeon as well, it will give you a level requirement. Usually the level requirement for the tier 3 dungeon is level 50. And the requirement for the tier 4 dungeon is level 70. However, you don't have to be those levels to do the capstone dungeon. If you feel like your character is strong enough or you've progressed enough, even if you're below that level, you can challenge the capstone dungeon and get it done. And what's cool about capstone dungeons is they have no death limit, unlike nightmare dungeons. You can do them and die and die and die. As long as you can clear it, you can finish it, you can get the reward of unlocking the next tier. My general advice for these, the first capstone dungeon that you get in Kyovashad up here that unlocks the tier 3, if you have a good build and you're confident, I would challenge it at level 45 or 46. A couple levels ahead of time, you can finish it up. The reason you might want to do this is it'll lock the next tier, which gives you access to new items. So if you go into Nightmare tier 3, you can then start getting sacred items, which at base are better than the items you have now, and you can get into that sooner. And the same thing goes for the Nightmare tier 4. You can do that dungeon, which I think is over here somewhere. You can do that dungeon at level 65 or 66 if you have a complete build and you're confident, or if you just want to struggle bust through it and get it done. You don't have to wait until level 70 to unlock tier 4 or until level 50 to unlock tier 3. You can get that early if you want. Another tip I wish I knew sooner is that there is missed drop protection in the game. So anything that is super rare, so a legendary or a unique, or if it's a like cosmetic item like mount barding or a specific mount, if it drops when you're doing something and you walk away from it and then you don't pick it up, the next time you enter into town, on your icon for your stash will be a little exclamation point, letting you know that you missed loot. It doesn't do this for anything that's like common loot or like rare or magic, but if it's rare enough, it'll show up in your stash. So when you're in town and you see an exclamation point on your stash, go over, check it out, and before you can even access your stash, it'll be a one-page thing that says, hey, you missed this. I've actually got mount barding that I didn't pick up. I don't even remember missing it, but I left it behind and you can find it in your stash. The next thing that I wish that I started doing sooner, or I was aware of sooner, is to make smart use of the pins on your map. Not only in the overworld, but also in dungeons. At any time in instance content and overworld content, you can mark an area of the map and it will make a line that is the smartest path to that location. The one caveat I'll add is, for whatever reason in this area here and in the Imperial Library, for whatever reason, the mapping here sucks. It doesn't really know how to get places. Like, it won't just go like this. You see, it has to go through this for some reason. But there's a couple areas where it's rough, but in general, it's actually really good. So what I like doing is, like, say I'm in a Helltide, I'm looking for a chest. I mark the chest that I want to buy when I walk up to it. So say I find a good weapon or jewelry chest that I want to buy, but I don't have enough cinder yet to buy it. I'll open my map and then I'll mark it inside the Helltide, and then I'll go about my business and start clearing and looking for cinder and doing all that. The reason I like this is because there's so much extra content in the game. You'll find a random event that you'll collect obols from. You'll find some rare that spawns. Some crazy event is happening. Maybe a world boss is popping up nearby and you want to go do it. And then when you get distracted, your ADD takes you somewhere else. You then say, oh, what was I doing? And then you look at your map, you're like, oh yeah, I was going over here. And you can just follow the line. So I think doing that often really makes the experience nice, because there's definitely times where you get completely sidetracked and you get lost. On top of that, I started doing this a lot in dungeons. The main reason is that some objectives in dungeons, especially nightmare dungeons, if you're too far away from the objective, it stops appearing on your map. Which means if it's like you have to put something on a pedestal, or you have to cleanse something, or you have to open a gate, or you have to kill a mob, if you walk away from it, it will no longer show on your map. So what I do is, if it's one of those pedestal type objectives, as soon as I find it on the map, I'll mark it as, okay, I need to do this. In the dungeons, it won't make a pathway for you, but the pin will still be there. And sometimes the dungeons get huge. You may end up wandering like all the way over here for an objective, and you're like, oh crap, where do I take this pedestal? Where do I go? But if you already marked it, you can just beeline straight back to it. Even if you're out of range and the objective icon doesn't show up, the mark helps you out tremendously, and I recommend doing this because it makes the experience far easier and it speeds up your grind. And the last thing I'll leave you with is a question that I get commonly on my stream and in comments. And it starts with a very simple and innocent question. If the stats are the same and I get legendary powers for having a one-hander and an off-hander, or a two-hander, why would I ever run a two-hander? What's the point? Why wouldn't I just get 2 legendary powers instead of 1? And this is something that I see people when they're first playing the game and getting into it get confused by. And the answer to that question is pretty awesome. If you go to a legendary power, you can see that if an item is ever placed, a legendary power is ever placed on an amulet or a two-handed weapon, the value of that legendary goes up. If it's on a two-handed weapon, it doubles the value of it. If it's on an amulet, you get 50% more. So the items that if you decide to go, if you have a build that can run two-handed weapons, pick a legendary that makes the most sense to scale up by double and put it on your main hander. One of the ones that surprises people a lot is you have a legendary for, say, like Necromancer that increases the number of pets that you can have. This legendary, so like increases the number of pets that you have by 2. So this one here, your viscous utility. This one increases the amount by 2. You can put this actually on an amulet and it makes it increase by 3 instead of 2. It gets you a whole other pet. This also works for some that have flat-based values or damage scaling or damage reduction, all kinds of things. So you can determine if you want to run, if you can run a two-hander, if you're not like a full attack speed builder spender build that needs a certain amount of attack speed to function. Maybe you need one-handers and you need to deal with it that way. Or if you are like a barbarian and you want to have specific things for your two-hand bludgeoning and two-hand slashing, when you bring them out and use them, then you get that extra value and it gives you more scaling from that. But where you put your legendaries matters a lot because it gives you different scaling depending on what the legendary is. So that answers the question, why would I ever use a two-hander if I can get 2 legendary slots? It's because you can make one of those legendaries twice the value. And for the jewelry slots, the one that goes on your amulet is scaled up even more. I like attack speed for the build I'm running right now. So I have one that, since it's on my amulet, this gives me 35% attack speed. But if I put it down onto the rings here, it would be significantly less. And that's what I've got for you today. Remember to come by the live stream today to get your drops and your mount for gifted subs, or come hang out if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them and talk to you about the game. Looking forward to seeing you there. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.